Now, today's episode is one that I love doing. It's almost one that I've done annually, but I do like to talk about projects that are sort of like ongoing and talk about potential updates that are taking place. But beyond that, I'm sure there are some people who have never come across a project, so it's always an opportunity to sort of like bring it up again and talk about what it actually is. In order to do that, I'm going to bring on today's guests. I'm going to start with guest numero uno. No, hold on. At this stage, I got to do this first and I got to do that. We have our first guest right here. And before you say anything, first guest, I'm going to bring on guest number two. And we have our second guest right here. We had our second guest right here. You know what he did? What he did want to do is show us that beautiful ring of his. Hello. Oh, did he freeze? Oh, there it is. All right. All right. I see the ring. I see the ring.
He's not available, ladies.
Pardon me. Yeah, and exactly. He's not available, ladies. So a million apologies there on his behalf. So that being said, gentlemen, I'll start with Nick. I'll have you introduce yourself.
Henri, it's great to be here. My name is Nic Jansma. I work at Akamai on the mPulse product. I work on other things like the RUM Archive that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Do some standards work in the W3C and get to work with amazing folks like Robin here. I also wanted to say it's pretty awesome that in the 3 months or so that you've been doing the speedy streams, you've already had, was it 13?
Yeah.
13 of them. That's great. That's awesome. It's wonderful for the community, and it's definitely the highlight for me to look into them and see what's going on. So thanks for doing this, and thanks for inviting us today.
Oh man, thank you. You know what? It was always sort of like sitting on ice, and I've wanted to have this kind of conversation in the past. So, and it's just fun, just little discoveries, little memories sometimes. And again, I really want people to come on and just talk about things that they're working on, and as long as they're able to, and that's the most important part. So, folks, if there are NDAs on your projects, I don't want you to get fired over this. It's not that important, but it's always interesting to have these kind of conversations and let people know what is happening out there. Robin, I know you've been on before, but if you want to catch people up on who you are.
Sure thing. Robin Marx, web performance specialist, also at Akamai, where I get to work with great people like Nick on helping improve our customers'
Awesome.
performance, obviously. And that's also how I rolled into the RUM Archive project, of course.
Right. Absolutely. Which is what we're going to talk about today, the RUM Archive project, or the RUM Archive period. And I know, Robin, you've been through this before, but I'm going to start with Nick. Nick, part of the process here, as we introduce people to my guests, I like to ask people what was their first touch point with web performance, how you got into it, what got you interested, and essentially what landed you here.
Oh, that's a really good question. Man, it's been a minute. I started building my own websites pretty young. I think one of my current websites has been running for nearly 30 years.
Well,
It started in the late 90s. I think in 96 or 97, something like that. So we're almost on 30 years of it.
wow.
So I just, that's basic stuff back then, of course. My interest in web performance specifically was because of Mr. Souders and his original book around making websites fast, and when he was working at Yahoo with other amazing people. Then just kind of hooked on performance like things ever since. I was working on the Windows performance team at the time that book came out, doing some other perf stuff for Windows, and moved into Internet Explorer performance and continued the path through through various web performance things since then.
Interesting. So were you at Microsoft?
I was, yeah. I worked on Internet Explorer versions 7, 8, and 9 back in the day. Spent a couple of years on that team and had some fun. And bounced around a little bit since then and ended up at Akamai.
Wow. So the one thing I'm going to ask, you built your website. It's been around for 30 years. Do you remember what you built it in?
Let's see. Like, I think I was using Dreamweaver for a time, like the actual tool, and it was just like basic HTML and CSS back in the day, hand edited at that point. I don't even know if I had any JavaScript to begin with, right? It was probably more just images and text and an under construction banner, because everybody had those back in the day. Some blinking text because you could do that. No, that's about it. And then it has evolved from there for sure.
I'm going to ask only because you said you worked on Internet Explorer 7, 8, and 9, I think you mentioned. My first, I mean, definitely wasn't my first browser, but I remember, believe it or not, folks, being excited that there was a Mac version of Internet Explorer. And I was using that for a while, and it just looked pretty, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing right now." I can't believe I'm saying this, folks.
It
Uh,
was amazing.
it absolutely was. But were you on a PC or Macintosh platform at the time? And were you working on which platform were you working on?
PC only. Yeah. In fact, by the time I was working on it at Microsoft, there was no mentions of any sort of, Mac releases at that point. So I think it'd been like more earlier days. Yeah.
Wow. And Robin, I remember last time you talked about, your touch point with performance was through like the academic channels. If you want to sort of rehash that for folks who may not have caught it.
Let me give you a different story.
Oh,
That goes back even before that. So I've been doing websites for a long time since I started studying. But then in I think my 4th year at university, we had to do like a master's thesis, and one of my fellow students, he was a contributor to Drupal. Drupal, right, the big PHP CMS, which was then still very young. And his master thesis was web performance analysis and optimization of Drupal. And this is 2010. Okay, like nothing existed in that thing. Like it was all bare bones. And the things he presented in his thesis presentation were like mind blowing. I've been doing web for like 5 years. I'd never seen anything like that, or the stuff he was doing. And that really stuck with me. That was like a spark. It took me a few years to get back to it because I first wanted to make some games, as we discussed last time. But so that still stuck with me. That is, by the way, for people who might know him still, it's Wim Leers. He is still one of the core contributors at Drupal at Acquia. There as well. Still doing amazing work.
amazing. I did not know that. Good to hear. And, I love asking this question because it tends to sort of like jog memories. And people start to sort of like look back and see exactly where they were. Last week, I know when I had Philip Tellis, someone you both obviously know as well, he definitely brought up, Steve Souders, and when he moved over from overseas over to California, and everything, around the time is Nick sort of discovered the book as well, and everything that was going on over at Yahoo, which something I'd love to talk about as well. Eventually, would pull out some of the people who are still around from that team. Uh, Great. Good to hear. And again, folks, I do that just because everyone's got a bit of a different path. We've heard people talk about their experiences, with mobile phones and wondering why their friends were having better experiences than them. That was Jakob Gross over at Framer. He talked about that, and so many other topics. But the topic at hand today is, which has been for the last like few weeks, in fact, RUM. We're going to talk about real user monitoring, but specifically the RUM archive. And I'm going to bring people up to date very quickly, simply because we're right around the corner from this conference called Perf Now, which happens in Amsterdam once a year. And 3 years ago, Nick was on stage, and during his presentation, he basically presented this idea of looking at RUM data, and introduced us to this thing called the RUM archive. So let's just sort of like in your words, Nick, let's sort of like run through what that project is, why it came about, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a project that's been around for, as you said, about 3 years, but had been a few more years in the making before that. Um, so the RUM Archive is a free, it's open source, open data, publicly available data set. All it is data um, of RUM, real user monitoring metrics. So data around page loads, data around resource fetches. The data that is published today comes from the Akamai mPulse dataset. We aggregate and anonymize hundreds of millions of page views every day. Throw it all into a mixer so you can't identify it, any individual or website or company or any of that. But then we publish it to Google BigQuery in a way that anybody could access it and they could do research on it. We can talk about what kind of research in a little bit. Um, the project itself, yeah, we announced it about 3 years ago. A few of us at Akamai, so myself and Philip and Tariq, Robin joined shortly after because he joined Akamai shortly after that, if I recall correctly. Others at the company as well have been working to find a way to accurately, safely publish this data in a way that could be useful to the general public, to researchers, academics, etc. We had to find our way through legal. We had to find our way through, the marketing folks and other people that may have an opinion on this stuff. And ultimately, we took a lot of inspiration from other amazing projects that came before us, right? So, you talk about archive.org and just the Internet Archive and the things that they do and how beneficial that is to society, I would say. I would not put us on that level of the Internet Archive, but like as inspiration. Um, the HTTP archive, which from a synthetic measuring point of view has been publishing data for many, many years now. I don't even remember how many at this point. That has also been an amazing resource for us as a community to be able to follow the trends of the internet and how pages are changing and made differently. And it's been really amazing that Google's been driving a lot of that, sponsoring it, and other folks have been contributing to that. And we've been publishing papers and stuff around that. Crux data, the Chrome user experience report, has been awesome too, but it's it's focused on Chrome data, obviously. And so we found that we could have a little niche carved out where we could actually contribute um, to the data out there, to what's free and publicly available, because our view of the internet is different. The mPulse, the Akamai view of data flowing in is different than all of those other ones that we just talked about. We have performance data, we have RUM data, we have it from across all browsers, focused on our view of the world, so on mPulse customers, so it's biased in that way, and we can talk about biases later if we want to. But it is a slice of the internet that we're sharing with others.
And it's fantastic. Again, I'm a big fan of the idea of like looking at some of this data and understanding what some of the patterns are, user experience patterns, trends that are taking place, whether it be like over a long period of time or even a short, so you can kind of understand how people kind of react to events. Something that I'm going to ask very quickly, and it's kind of like an aside, but you'd mentioned having to go through legal, having to go through marketing. Like, what kind of conversation would legal have in these kind of situations?
Oh, really good question. Yeah. So we are putting data out there that came from different sources,
Mhm.
right? It came from customer A of ours and customer B of ours and customer C of ours. And maybe they don't want their individual data identified. So we had to find a way where we could aggregate all this data, put it into a mixer, grind it up a little bit if you would, and make sure it's not identifying any particular websites patterns, because then that customer, if it was identifiable, some of its competitors could identify the patterns and maybe, take some insights from that they wouldn't want to expose. So it was just a matter of, making sure we talk through all of the safeguards we put in place when we're aggregating and anonymizing this data, making sure that everybody is okay with it. Another thing that we had to work through was the way that we publish this data is interesting in that we're not just publishing counts and times like averages or anything. We're also publishing some histograms of the data in a way that allows any researcher looking at the aggregate data set to calculate any, or at least estimate any percentile they wanted. So if they want to look at the median of page load time or the 75th percentile of page load time or the 90th, because we're publishing data in a histogram-like format, then you can look at things beyond just the means. You can look at percentiles. We have Akamai holds a few patents around the storage, aggregation, and querying of data in a bulk format like that. And so we actually had to allow people to query the data in the format that we pushed. There is a release of usage rights for people to use this code that we wrote, this algorithm that we wrote in order to query it in a way that is easy for everybody to use. So again, working through making sure we're crossing all of the legal dots and I's and T's and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And, and Robin, I'm not sure if you sort of like know the details there as well. In terms of making sure that everything is squeaky clean, like what kind of process needs to take place?
It's a combination of a variety of things, right? Simple things like not exposing IP addresses are obvious things. Not exposing actual website URLs is another. So if you query the main data set, at least, you won't be able to be like, okay, give me all the data for big customer A, because all of that is not there. It's important to note that one of the new things we recently added is that we have a couple of individual websites where we do allow that, where people actually opt in to share the full data. But so the main anonymized data set does not have that. So those are obvious things, but then you go into heavy aggregation, right? So each row in the database does not represent a single beacon or a single page visit. It represents a whole group of them combined across the dimensions where they're very similar. Then we generate the histograms and everything. And then we do further work of cutting out outliers. So I think it's like, if for this specific combination of dimensions, there are less than, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, 5 individual beacons. Yeah. So there are fewer than 5 users who had those specific conditions. We don't include them in the data set to make it even more difficult to track this to individual users, individual sessions or websites. So there's many different ways that goes down. All of that is also documented on the website, by the way, if people want to know. To eventually come to something that is, we believe, fully safe and privacy secure, let's say, to use, but that is still useful to be able to do analysis on, because that's always the difficult trade-off, right?
I'm sure, I have a feeling I probably know what they're going to say, but you mentioned you have to sort of go through marketing as well. Now, is marketing going to look at this as some kind of like competitive advantage that they just want to put out, they don't want to put out there, or what would be their angle in having any kind of potential sort of like disagreement with this being so open?
And to be honest, I don't think there was much barriers in speaking with our marketing folks around this. It's just another venue that you need to make sure you're doing when you're doing anything in corporate America these days. In general, we've had a lot of support internally at Akamai for this project. People are happy that we're able to do this in a way that kind of builds upon the community and pushes things out there. What I would like to reinforce during this stream, though, is that we built this project and we released it with the support of the team at Akamai, but we want it to be a project for the community and contributed with other people. So we don't want it to be just the brand name of Akamai on it. Of course, we support it, but like we would love for it, and maybe we'll dive into that part a little bit. We would love for it to be also data contributed from other companies or other individuals or other websites, just to strengthen it and give more diversity of the view of the data. So the marketing team itself, have been supportive of it, and we publish a lot of articles, and we have a blog on the rumarchive.com that you can read all the stuff that we're talking about, of course, and we're looking for more ways to continue to use it and to highlight it.
Absolutely. And, Let's just touch on that a bit too, because I do believe that would be amazing to have a bit more community contributions around the actual project. Now, what would be the ideal? And I don't want to say ideal in the sense like there are tiers of contributors, but what kind of contributor, who would be an ideal contributor to the RUM archive?
Well, yeah, let me talk about the data sets that we have today and how they differ, and then
Mhm.
what we envision could be other folks or individuals or corporations that could contribute to it as well. The primary data set that we released 3 years ago, today we're calling it the Akamai mPulse Top 100 data set.
Mhm.
So every day we take a look at our top 100 customers by volume.
Mhm.
We normalize the amount of data to the least volume of that top 100. So number 100's data volume, and we get the same amount of beacons from all of them. So we're not allowing our most volumistic customer to overwhelm the data set, like they're represented as 1/100th every day.
Mhm.
And then all those 100 websites, we grab their data, we mix it in together, we do that aggregation and anonymizing that Robin was talking about. We summarize it and push it out there. So this is our top 100 data set. Over time, we have something. It's been about 3 years. I think we released it at the end of November of 22. Is that right?
Potentially,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. And so we have roughly around 1,200 days of data that you can look back into for every day
Mhm.
since then, for page loads. Um, as a side note, besides page load data, we also have a data set focused on resource timing. So
Mhm.
resources and all of the third-party resources that are seen commonly across multiple websites. So as you might imagine, you would see like Google Analytics up there and the Facebook tag and stuff like that. And we're measuring how frequently those are being loaded across our customers, their speed, how often they're cached, that kind of stuff. So we have a couple different data sets for like our top 100 customers. But so in that top 100 data set, we have 1,200 days. It's millions of page loads per day. I forget what the total amount of data is at this point. A year ago, it was a billion or so rows. So I would guess it's, we're over 2 billion rows of data representing many, many, many more actual experiences within there. That's one data set. The thing that we announced about a month ago at the end of September was that we do have a few individual websites also being added to the RUM archive. I will, it's okay. I'm going to share my screen a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So this is a blog post on the rumarchive.com. We released it a little while ago. We have new data set that kind of is a tag along to the main top 100, which are Akamai employees, individual websites. And so we have 3 websites. 2 of them are from me, my personal websites, the ones that I own, sarna.net and virtualglobecharting.com. And then one from Timberiki, scalemates.com as well. These are all, small to medium sized hobby websites. Um, and we are publishing the data for this alongside the top 100, not in the same table, so it doesn't get mixed in. But it provides a slightly different view of the data that is out there. And one of the reasons why we have these websites listed is because it um, has some benefits and some downsides versus the top 100. For example, so each of these websites are identified. Like they actually have in the row what website it belongs to.
Mhm.
So you could track if you wanted to. My personal website's traffic levels over time. You could hold that website constant if you wanted to see how traffic patterns change. And one of the reasons why that can be interesting is because um, when we're mixing in the top 100 together for the aggregation and anonymizing, that top 100 list changes every day. Like, number 90 through 100, maybe those volume levels may change. Maybe we gain a customer, maybe we lose a customer. And so over time, we're not holding the actual websites the same in the top 100 aggregate set, whereas these websites are being held the same. You
Mm.
could actually go in, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You could actually go in and look at ScaleMate's median time to first byte over time for the last 2 years. with some interesting patterns here. And because we're tracking those individual websites, we can say, oh, this is actually scalebase.com and how quick it is. What is that spike? And we do have some some interesting insights into that. So that's one reason why we publish it. The other is that websites, these individual websites are specifically not anonymous. They are not a mixture of other ones. So if you were to look at, say, the breakdown of device type, mobile, desktop, tablet, in the top 100 over the last few days, you can see this breakdown of 61% mobile in the top 100. If you look at any individual website, it's going to be different because those are real websites, not a grouping of name. So on sarna.net, which is a wiki, we get less than 50% is mobile. Scalemates, it's even less than that. That's a model website. Virtual Globetrotting, kind of a satellite traveling website, is higher. So each of these has their own visitor type of people that visit them, traffic patterns. They are going to be different. And so you could, if you wanted to, track on sarna.net over the last 2 years how the distribution of Chrome or between the browsers or what regions people are loading from or the speeds that they're loading pages from on those has happened. So that's one other interesting aspect of it. And the third interesting aspect is that we are not sampling the data for these websites, for these 3 individual ones. So Tim and I have chosen to not sample. So as a result, we're not throwing out the outliers. In the top 100 data set, because we're doing aggregation and anonymization, we do trim out anything, as Robin was saying, anytime there's less than 5 hits to a bucket, bucket being the combination of all the dimensions, we throw it out, which means a lot of outliers don't make it in our data. In this case, we're actually keeping all those outliers in there because we're essentially publishing 100% of the data. And that has its own benefits for looking at things. So all in all, these 2 kind of parallel data sets, one of aggregation, the top 100, and the other one of individual websites, they have different use cases, if you will, different scopes of data. If we were looking at, for example, the top 100's time to first byte over the last few years, you can see it kind of goes up and down between 420 and 500 milliseconds. This is actually only for a month, I believe. It's a lot of data to look at. Whereas if you look at the individual websites, it's actually a lot less data. The actual volume of data you would have to use to query in BigQuery is a lot less. And we can plot it for a lot longer time as a result. So that's why we get, in this case, 2 years worth of data. So looking at my own personal websites here, we have time to first byte median for Sarna and Virtual Globetrotting. You can see there's an interesting drop in response time for these. And I know that's accurate because I actually switched servers, web servers around that time and got a nice beefier hardware in a data center. Very happy to see that time to first byte had decreased.
You went for a V8, you went for the bigger engines.
Exactly. Now I will point out that I am nowhere near as good as Tim's website with ScaleMates, because you'll look at the scale over here and his TTFs are in the hundreds. Man, what does he do? He is a magician with web performance. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the spike.
His kids will tell you. They're like, yeah, he's in his office, working on his LCP.
I bet that is true for a lot of the time.
It's amazing. I love it.
He's an amazing guy, and I love the fact that he's willing to share this data alongside of us. Who knows who will find this stuff interesting? And so, one of our calls to action that we're trying to do whenever we can. You asked a lot of this question prefixed on who else can contribute. I think there's a couple different types of people, if they wanted to contribute data to the RUM Archive, that they could choose to have. We have published, for the RUM Archive, we published a format, a prescribed type of data. Like the rows should look like this, the columns should look like that. As long as you follow kind of that standard, then anybody could publish their own data set. It won't necessarily get mixed in with ours. We probably wouldn't want that to be the case. You could publish it to your own BigQuery tables or some other compatible SQL-like table that people could read. But let's say you're an individual, a web performance expert or fan, or you have a hobby website. If you can aggregate the data in a way that looks similar to ours, and myself and Robin and Tim and Phil and everybody would be happy to help with that aggregation query. We published some sample ways that we do it in our with a Spark SQL-like query in the open source GitHub here. If you're an individual with a small website, you could publish your data in a RUM Archive compatible format, and that would add to the diversity of data that we have. If you're a RUM provider and you have a lot of customers like mPulse does, you could consider aggregating that data, probably anonymizing it like we do, and then also publishing that data in a similar format. If you're a corporation, a government entity, an open source thing, who knows, right? If you're a website that has a lot of data that you think could be interesting, if you're already publishing that data in another format, you could consider publishing it to the RUM Archive with some transforms that Robin and I and others could. So that's our hope. Our hope and dream is this: we don't want this to be just an Akamai thing. We would love for it to be community owned and driven and participation, because we think that would be even better, even more beneficial.
Absolutely. So I'm going to sort of like throw out a couple very low hanging fruit, simple ideas. And you're saying, if someone is a RUM provider, they have, there's a guide for them to sort of like set up their data and just, contribute. So are we talking about in very like simple terms, like would a CDN be the type of provider that would have the data that would be well suited for the RUM archive?
Yeah. I mean, Akamai is a CDN as well, right?
Yep.
We have a RUM product that's collecting RUM data. A lot of other CDNs do that as well. So yeah, CDN, another, RUM provider, again, individuals as well. Anybody that's collecting RUM data. And we have open source tools that can collect RUM data. The Web Vitals collects it library, the Boomerang library that Wolf was talking about last week.
I mean, Web Vitals, obviously Google collects it, but they have their own. I guess, would Crux be a competing data set ultimately?
It's similar and different in many ways, right? So Crux obviously is limited to Chrome, and ours is not. I could imagine that if the Crux team wanted to, they could release a version of their data set in a similar way to the RUM archive that would match the formatting we did. I'm not sure if they would want to or if they should, but I think they could. Yeah. So Crux would be very similar to this.
But I don't say this is not bad, but I guess the unfortunate part would just be that it's more Chrome data that would potentially skew the RUM archive in that way. Am I correct?
I wouldn't say skew it in that way. I would say that they have their own perspective. They have their own caveats, just like ours does. So the mPulse data is biased. Like, right, we have our customers, we have our types of customers that use Akamai mPulse more than doing it on their own. Like, we skew to retail, financial websites a lot of the time. We don't have a lot of hobby blogs in our top 100. None, probably. Whereas the Crux data would have its own view of the world, its own biases. And I think as long as the provider of this data is very upfront about those and tries to document them and share those caveats, I think that the researcher looking at that data can take that into account. Hand over to Robin.
Yeah. Robin, you want to say something? I saw your hand up.
Yeah, just because even though we don't have individual sites in the data set, we do have a source column that we have in there. So currently the source for everything is mPulse. But if Crux would add their data, it would still be differentiable from the Akamai data. You can then still choose to be like, okay, let's query only the Crux data or only the other data set and keep mPulse separate. Or you could aggregate over all the sources together, right? So you could choose yourself whether or not you do the biases or combine the biases.
And the other thing I would say is we haven't yet had another company publish data in this format, so we don't know exactly how it will work. I think our vision is that we're publishing data to a very specific BigQuery table. I think if other people wanted to participate, they would choose their own tables to push to, and then you would choose as a researcher or academic, do you want to look at both tables, one table? Do you want to combine the data somehow because it makes sense to you? But as long as, Robin was saying, as long as the source is set appropriately, so all of ours have mPulse, and in one of our tables, we have in the top 100 table, the site being measured as multiple. And the individual websites table, we actually list like Sarna.net or virtualglobetrading.com or scalemates.com. And so you can still filter out and pick and choose what kind of data you're looking at. You can always do that.
Awesome. Now you talked about being able to sort of like segment the data sets and whatnot to do research, be it an engineer at some company or an academic. Since we're on the academic topic, Robin, have you done any kind of, I know you've always from time to time sort of like publish some work on the blog. Is there anything recently that you've worked on that you want to share?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it research.
Coming from the academic, the PhD.
In a full academic sense, no. But we do look at the data regularly, of course, right? So what I'm looking here was, I've spoiled it already, damn it. So one thing added, and that's like one of the big powers I see of having this is not just the RUM data itself, but also how we can cross-correlate it with other public data sets. So for example, this is something called baseline. The browsers recently started tracking which browser features have become available across the different browser engines. So if it's available everywhere, they call it baseline, which means it's kind of safe to use because it's supported on every browser. But it takes a while for browser versions to become updated everywhere for everyone in the world. So what we can do is we can take the baseline data. Google knows which feature becomes available in which version of which browser. And we have the RUM data that we know how many people worldwide are actually using which version of these browsers. And combining those together, we can actually say, okay, in this country, that many users actually have full baseline support. So it's safe to use all these multiple features for that amount of users in a specific country, for example. And I was very interested in looking at that as a slide I wanted to show, because there is definitely a variation between the countries, right? If you look at all countries here, aggregated, it's 86%, supports all the new baseline features. But if you look at the United States, it's slightly higher. Okay, but then we looked at Brazil. And Brazil, I somehow expected it to be quite low. It was actually the highest of everything. Brazil was at 94%, indicating that Brazil has very, like a population that has very modern devices, updates their browsers regularly, right? And then the one that is even more surprising to me on the right side there, I intentionally hid it behind question marks, is a country that was only 78%. So the question I like to ask in these presentations is like, which country of the ones on the left, Ari, I'm going to test your knowledge now. On the left are all the countries that we have in the data set. Which of those has the lowest baseline support, like the oldest devices or the people who update stuff the least? Which do you think?
I'm going to go, give me a second. I'm going to go Poland. I'm probably wrong, but
Poland, yeah. So actually it is South Korea.
okay.
The country of like massive 5G adoption and StarCraft 2 tournaments.
I was going to say that the country with like, no worries when it comes to bandwidth.
Yeah, exactly. So in my biased view, because I always try to be conscious of my biases, right? Because I know they exist. But even here, I would have thought that Brazil and South Korea would be switched, right? That South Korea would be the best or the most baseline supported, and that Brazil would be the least because of my biased worldview. But it's so very interesting to see that it's actually completely flipped. And then I talked about this a bit, and then I talked to Vinicius Delacqua. I think he's been on this speed stream as well, right? So he is from Brazil, right? And he came back and he was saying like, that's actually quite normal because in Brazil, most people are centered around the big cities, right? And a lot of people there have the newest stuff and everything. It's actually a very modern country from that perspective. So he was not surprised, but from my side, I was. And it's Like, is that kind of insight that I don't know if you can get from other data sets or public data sets, I should say, at this point. And it's that kind of insight that I would like to see more people explore and, get an idea from. I can only imagine being, let's say you're a company and you try to expand into new, you try to expand into new countries or new geographies, and you're trying to figure out, how to target specific users or how to sell our products with the websites. This kind of insight can be, I think, very, very valuable.
What other has there been any use case that has caught the RUM Archive team by surprise? Like, have you been pinged by anyone with some very, very interesting research recently?
It's a good question. We've been approached a couple times by folks that have been looking into the data for some research purpose or another, and they have questions about the data, right? Like, so as we led earlier, the data is our view of the world. It's biased for many reasons. It's very specific to how Boomerang JavaScript library collects data in the data that it collects. Like when Boomerang fires on the page, when it sends its beacon, may be different than the time that Crux collects data, for example, right? So again, there's a lot of caveats around it, from looking into things like rage clicks to BF cache adoption. There's been a lot of good questions about how can I interpret this data, and we do. We are on the web performance Slack. There is a RUM Archive channel there for anybody that wants to chat about it. We'll leave a link after this for people that want to join.
Absolutely.
I would say there's also a GitHub issues page for the project. Everything is published on GitHub, from the website source to examples for the table schema to how we aggregate at Akamai the data. We use the issue tracker there for tracking feature requests and questions about how things work. To your original question about interesting use case of it, I think a lot of it is just like hearing about how people want to look at this data and for what research purpose is interesting to them or helps them in their job. And we're excited to to be a resource for that.
Absolutely. And yes, Robin?
Yeah, I think next year we're going to see some very interesting research when the core web vitals are finally cross-browser.
That was my next question.
Because Crux is Chrome only. Like we said, is Chrome only. I think we will be the only data set that will have cross-browser, like public large-scale cross-browser core web vital data. I think then you're going to see a lot of people flocking in and trying that out. We're going to get questions on how to best do that. And that's also one of the things that I'm looking forward to most in digging into myself.
And I had this written down since like last week, with the more recent announcement that Apple and Safari had LCP over at STP right now. So that's in the process. I think I'm imagining, maybe I could be wrong, but I think it was this year that Firefox also adopted LCP, if I'm not mistaken, but I think it was fairly recent.
That's 2 years ago, actually, already.
Oh, it was 2 years? Okay, I'm terribly sorry. But
LCP, IMP is newer in Firefox as well.
But maybe that's it. Because I knew there was something they adopted more recently, and I'm just probably like mixing it up with Apple's more recent announcement. So you're betting on seeing a lot more. Obviously, we're going to see a lot more data eventually, but you're betting that we're going to see a lot more research around the data sets now that we have representation from Apple and certainly from Firefox.
Oh yeah,
that's what we're hoping for sure. And if you don't mind, if I could share my screen again really quick. The RUM Archive is just data, right? We publish data openly. If you have a BigQuery account, you can issue SQL queries, do whatever you want with it. If you are that technical and you love diving into the data, please do and ask us questions if you want. We have documentation on sample queries for how to actually query the data. Have at it. For those of us that want to just look at the data already calculated, already presented to us, if you just want to look at trends in the industry, there is an insights section on the page that Robin puts a lot of work into, that he's been driving, where we kind of pre-aggregate this data, or pre-query, pre-present this data to you in more palatable form than tables in a database. So we have, charts over time from September to 2022 to the last a few weeks ago of, for example, device type. They have operating systems and stuff like that. And again, this is the Cripple App 100 aggregate data set. Okay? Robin has already been talking about adding some core vital charts to this. And so, as we start seeing more data from all three browsers, I think we're going to expand upon this and make it more palatable or more easier to view just at a high level what how those browsers are comparing across the web.
No, that's awesome. And since you mentioned, people, well, you have the sample query page and people fiddling around. And I was actually thinking about this more recently because obviously, I think the last time we spoke, it wasn't much of a topic, but today I think it's, without a doubt, something that people do all the time. Um, have you come across anyone sort of like vibe coding some SQL queries to get, some answers out, just kind of like fiddling around, just going over to BigQuery and just saying, give me this.
No, but I challenge you to do that, Henry. I would love for
But
you to dive into the data a little bit more and let us know how that goes.
that'd be kind of funny. But because I don't know who I was talking to about it. It might have been Addy, I don't know, but that did come up, or maybe it was Barry actually. But that did come up. Where just I was like, I wonder if people are just going in there saying, "Hey, I just want to see this," and it just spits it out. Because ultimately, it will be that much easier for people to try to get some of that data out, and you look at some of these insights, and it doesn't have to be someone bothering Barry or yourself or Robin or Tim. And again, this would also expand it to people within a company who are just removed from the understanding of SQL queries and things like that. So super curious. Yes, Robin.
Yeah, anecdotally, actually, it was in a meeting with Paul Calvano today, probably also known. So he was actually showing that he's doing BigQuery analysis using Looker Studio, as well, the Google thing, where you can now have Python notebooks. So if people know that, you can have like Python code that progresses throughout the page, and you build on previous statements. And that is apparently, he was showing that very well integrated with AI, where he's like, he still puts in the queries manually, I think, or at least mostly. But then he can be like, okay, given this query or the data that comes back from this query, now give me a bar chart that slices the data in this way or visualize it in that way. And he was able to very quickly, show new things based on his stuff. So Google apparently has a very good AI integration for BigQuery. In that suite of products. So if you're already in that thing, it should be quite easy, I think, to integrate with this too.
Yeah, I need to go back in and take a look and make sure my wallet doesn't explode, because I remember you saying something that there might be about 2 billion rows of data now.
There's a lot, yeah. We actually do have a section here in the documentation around limiting BigQuery costs and how to segment your data. The data is partitioned by day, and so if you're limiting to just specific days, that'll arrange your costs a lot better. But yeah, it certainly is something you want to keep an eye on when you're creating this data set, because it's growing every day, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Robin quickly mentioned, what he's looking forward to in the future in terms of, the additional data that's going to be available now that Firefox has made some updates and they support INP. We know that LCP is going to be supported by Safari. Nic, what are you looking forward to in the next, say, year in over at the RUM Archive?
Well, so the project itself, it's a passion project from myself and Robin and a few other folks at Akamai, and it's not what we're doing full time, right? So we meet every other week or so just to talk about pushing it forward a little bit, or understanding who's using it and how we can help. We have a couple ideas, and some of those are documented in the GitHub issues tracker, but things like understanding the full set of dimensions better. So as an example, we only publish or say browser name, browser version, a subset of that data, because we're throwing out the outliers. We want to have a page that can give you kind of the full like that could allow you to see all the different possible values for a dimension without having to go to BigQuery or looking at an original data set.
Mhm.
And it could kind of help you understand what percentage of that data is represented in the RUM archive versus data that we had to throw out because it was one of the outliers in the mPulse data set. But we have a couple ideas for just kind of like making the data more understandable or reachable or approachable. Um, Ultimately, what I would love to spend my time on the next year is helping some other company or individual or website get their data into a similar format. So I'm hoping that's the case. As long as we keep on advocating for it, maybe we'll convince the right people to do it.
Right.
But yeah, just kind of we're doing a little bit at a time. I think we try to do like one or two major features a year,
Yep.
and then keeping the pipeline running on a daily basis, and that's pretty reliable at this point. So we are uploading data on a day-to-day basis every day right now. So get yesterday's data as of today.
Awesome. And I mean, any contributor would actually help, but that's something that I guess another contributor would sort of have to understand, that you usually do have a daily upload of data.
Well, I would say that other contributors could choose their own cadence, right? Like we are able to upload it on a day-to-day basis. If you want to contribute to the RUM archive, you publish it to your own table, and you have total control over how frequently that gets updated, what type of data, whether it's sampled or not. We're not trying to prescribe you have to do this in the way that we're doing it. We're just saying here's the data format. If you'd like to publish your data publicly, please try to follow the same format. So a query could be used on one data set versus the other data set, and they would both run the same way.
Now, we've talked about contributors who are, for the most part, enterprise. Are you looking for sort of like contributors as just like end developers that are out there? Is there anything in particular that someone could help out with regards to the RUM archive?
So the website itself, it's open source. The documentation there could obviously always be improved.
Okay.
If there are individuals that even just have a little bit of traffic to their websites and they just want to give it a try to see if they can upload their data and share it, I would love to go through that process and to iron out any kinks that we need to iron out for helping somebody else onboard. So really, really would encourage anybody that's interested to just reach out to us and we can figure out the right way to do it. The other, there's interesting chats happening around the data in WebPerf, for the RUM archive channel and WebPerf Slack. So if you're interested in this type of data, join there.
As usual, again, I've never been like needing to sell me on the RUM archive was never an issue. I always loved the project, and I hope that more people would get interested, eyeballs on it, and obviously more sort of like contributors to the data set. With that being said, closing statements. Robin, we'll start with you. If we haven't done that already, but if you wanted to mention something else.
I'm so happy with the state of web performance in the community right now. It's going so well the past few years. We've had these great initiatives like the core web fighters that really have put this front of mind and center. And then now going into the different browsers, like we said, it's only going forward. And I really do think that the RUM archive was like one of those missing niches, or the complementary parts that we were missing in all the amazing other data sets that we have available, right? Like we mentioned, HTTP archive being a very good example. So I do think there's a good niche for this and a good niche. I think we've shown we're willing to keep contributing this. So I just hope that this year will become the year that indeed more people start to both use it in more different ways. I'm really hoping that they might show up some graphs of ours in the upcoming Performance Now talks. Let's see. That would be great. And then, also people contributing more data so that we can, continue the story that web performance is not just about performance for performance sake or for added revenue for the e-commerce websites, but also performance is accessibility, performance is robustness, and some of those things become very measurable to something like the RUM archive. And I hope we're moving more and more towards that perspective of performance, and I think we can do good work there.
Awesome, awesome. And yourself, Nick, I know you sort of had a closing statement, but anything else you want to add outside of Go Blue?
Go blue. No, I'm very satisfied with Robin's answer. I will just plus one his closing statements. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, Henry.
Always.
I think we last chatted about it like a year and a half ago, and it's
Yeah.
nice to get this exposure and get some time to talk about it. I'm very excited about it, and so we appreciate that a lot.
Yep. No, by all means. And again, with Perf Now happening, I guess next week, it just came around to like an anniversary. It's like, hey, let's jump on a call, see what's going on over at the RUM Archive. Because I had seen a few updates and whatnot, and I'm like, okay, let me save this conversation for when we're closer to Perf Now, because I felt like it was more apropos at that point. Gentlemen, do not go anywhere. I do want to speak to you behind in the green room before we hit stop. And folks, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much again. Exit stream and bingo. And like that.